All right, good morning, everybody. Peyton Malone here, Channel 4. Hopping on here to give you a quick update on now tropical storm, or tropical depression rather, Cristobal. Let me turn down the volume there. I think it's too loud. All right, let me know if you can hear me okay. Hop on here, give you the 10 a.m. update. We just got it in from the National Hurricane Center, and there have been a little bit of changes, especially to the strength of the storm itself. So you can see there now a depression. The winds have back down to 35 miles per hour, and that's because it's been over land really the past day or so, and it's going to stay over land for the next day or so going beyond from now. So we don't expect any intensification from this anytime soon. It's very unorganized. You can see there the satellite presentation. A lot of the thunderstorms, those colder cloud tops have dissipated, and that means that the storms are really struggling. And right now, it's just kind of a weak, unorganized, broad system. Now, going into the future, we do expect it to still, or at least something to still get in, come off the Yucatan and try to reorganize as we go into Friday. So by Friday night, we still have it coming off the coast there of Mexico, you can see, and it re-strengthens back maybe into a tropical storm and then continues to head towards the north. So that seems fairly like a guarantee that we're going to see at least something still come off the Yucatan and towards the Gulf of Mexico. Now, as we go into the weekend, not a whole lot of change here. We're still expecting landfall somewhere along the Louisiana coast. It's looking more and more like maybe central Louisiana for the center of the storm. But remember, the impacts of this system are going to be felt far away from the center of the storm, and it is going to be pretty sloppy as well. So, making landfall as a tropical depression sometime Sunday night. So that is really remained the same over the past couple of days. There's really no huge changes in the forecast. If you're watching yesterday, the winds were 65 at landfall. Now they have them around 60. Not a whole lot of change there. Um, but that's just what we'll be watching as we go into the weekend itself. So the track, not a whole lot of change. The big change as of this morning is it's back down to a depression. We're still expecting some pretty decent rain totals. Let me zoom that back in. Now, anytime we get a June system like this, they're usually historic or known for being big rainmakers. We've seen it many years in the past. So we're still calling for maybe 4 to 10 inches. Now, the 10 inches is on the upper end of things. Likely won't see widespread 10 inches, but some areas could pick up that much rainfall as we go throughout the weekend into the early part of next week. So that continues to be our main concern. Of course, anytime you get a tropical system, there's other concerns. Wouldn't be surprised if we see coastal flooding. That seems almost like a guarantee. It doesn't look like significant storm surge, but you get a strong onshore flow from a landfalling tropical system to our west. We're on the east side of the storm. That does mean you're going to see some coastal flooding in those low-lying areas. So something to watch out for. Winds, it could be rather gusty. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a tropical system. We're going to see some gusty winds, possibly up to 40, 60 miles per hour. That'll be on the high end of things and as you get closer to the center of the storm. But that's something we'll have to watch. And of course, anytime you get a lot of rainfall and you get some gusty winds, you're going to get possibly some sporadic or power outages. So that's something you'll have to watch for as well. But right now, it looks like the main story could be certainly the rainfall as we go into the weekend and the beginning part of next week. Now, the arrival of those stronger winds. Now, while we're not terribly concerned with a widespread, large area of destructive winds, as I mentioned, we could certainly see some of those tropical storm force winds depending on how organized this system is. And we could see those stronger winds start to approach the coastline as we go into Saturday night and early Sunday morning before sunrise. Now, this is the current forecast. Of course, this could change around a little bit, but anywhere you see those yellows is where you're going to start to see some of those tropical storm force winds, possibly by late Saturday into Sunday morning. So that's when it'll start to be a little bit more dangerous if you're going to be out on the roadways. And of course, bridges aren't safe to be on when the winds are blowing that fast. So that's something we'll have to watch. Now, if the center moves close enough to the New Orleans area, we could see some of those stronger winds start to move in by Sunday, late morning into the afternoon. Just something we'll have to watch. Now, the storm itself, there's still a lot of uncertainty. What we've noticed over the past couple, since last night, is the storm has weakened considerably. That's not a bad thing. The more unorganized the system is as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, the less likely it is to be significantly strong once it gets to Louisiana, let's say. Now, it's still going to be a big rainmaker, but if it takes longer to get organized, if it remains kind of broad and messy, the wind threat not as high as, of course, if we had an organized tropical system. So the chance of this becoming a hurricane, very, 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 very low right now because we've watched the system become very unorganized and that inner core has really been disrupted as it stayed over land. Now, why it's not moving right now, you've probably been watching the past 24 to 36 hours. The thing has not moved hardly any, and it's our pattern. We have an upper level ridge that is essentially kind of pushing down on Cristobal and keeping it down in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, what's going to happen over the next 24 hours as we go into Friday night, this upper level low is going to start to tug on all this moisture. It's going to start to tug on what's left of the storm and start to draw it into the Gulf of Mexico. But here's what's important about this. You see all this brown right here? That is extremely dry air, and we know how dry air affects tropical systems. Think back to Barry, what dry air did to that system. Now, I'm not sure it's going to have that same impact on this, but we're going to have to see how this dry air interacts with this broader circulation and whatever reorganizes once it gets over the Gulf. If the storm remains a little bit more organized, it can somewhat kind of protect itself from this dry air. Now, if the storm is more unorganized and more sloppy and messy, this dry air is more likely to get wrapped up in it. I'll show you what I'm talking about with one of our models here. So this is this is the Euro model, just giving you an idea of the dry and moist air. Anywhere you see the green, that's the really moist air. Anywhere you see the browns, that's the really dry air. You don't, well, you do want dry air in a tropical system if you want it to weaken it. So here's what the model shows. You have this big plume of moisture heading into the Gulf of Mexico by Saturday. Here's the center of the circulation. Here's all the dry air to the east. Now, models have been keeping this fairly unorganized, so what happens with it, I want you to watch this dry air on the backside get wrapped up into what is left of Cristobal or whatever the system may be. Watch what it does. You get some of this dry air getting wrapped up into the backside of the system. This is by Sunday morning, as we're seeing plenty of moisture on the north of the system, so we'll still likely see rainfall starting late Saturday going into early Sunday. But the big question Sunday into Monday is how does this dry air affect the system itself? So if you get enough dry air wrapping up into this, well, then your rain chances might not be as high. Now you might be wondering, well, how do we know if that's going to happen? It's difficult to say until it actually starts to happen. So we likely won't have a good idea and grasp on what dry air does to the system until probably Saturday once it actually gets into the Gulf and starts interacting with the dry air and that upper level low. Now, this will likely be a very messy system, meaning we'll probably see a lot of rainfall near the center of it, which could be in the southeast and southern Louisiana, maybe to South Mississippi. You'll likely see kind of a lull and then this kind of tail. We call it, it looks like a comma almost, but a tail of moisture streaming down in the Gulf and up towards Florida. There'll probably be some heavy rainfall towards Florida as well. Now, in that setup, you also see the tornado threat. So the tornado threat would likely be highest kind of in this outer band, maybe towards Florida and the Florida Panhandle up into southern Georgia and Alabama. But we can't rule out a few isolated spin up tornadoes as you get closer to the system. That's certainly something we'll have to be watching. But that's just one of these setups with these messy systems is we're not quite sure how the dry air is going to really play a role in the evolution of this system. So that's something we'll have to watch, and that could definitely throw a wrench into this entire forecast. And we have seen it time and time again where dry air gets entrained into these thunderstorms. It causes a huge headache into the forecast, and the forecast ends up not being um, what we initially expected. So another little quick update before we log off here. I'll go on for a couple of more minutes. Tropical depression, Cristobal, has weakened. It's over land. That's good news. That means it's going to take longer for it to organize as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico by Friday. And then I'll show you one last track in the forecast. We have it emerging back over the Gulf by Friday night. And then we should start to see some rainfall and the winds pick up by Saturday night along the coast. And that'll creep up to where Sunday and going into Monday will probably be our main day as we see the best rain chances and maybe some gusty winds and coastal flooding. And as I mentioned, we'll also have to watch out for some isolated tornadoes. So still, not a whole lot of change with the forecast. You're still going to have to monitor this. There are still some uncertainties because the storm itself is still over land. These things are very, can, surprise you in a lot of ways. with how they evolve. Maybe a new center of circulation tries to develop if the one currently really dissipates, and that can kind of change the forecast too. So this thing is still far from set in stone, and that's why we want you to check back as we go throughout. Really, Friday and Saturday, we'll have a much better idea. But that's going to do it for here on Facebook Live. Of course, we'll be on at noon with our next update, and then we'll be on, we'll get our next update on the track at 4 p.m. We'll probably do another Facebook Live at 4 p.m. with an update, so we want you to stay tuned with that. Everyone have a safe and wonderful day, and make sure you are staying up to date on the forecast.